This is 9 o'clock. Let's start our webinar this morning. Welcome to everyone joining the Forum Kajian Pembangunan this morning. Welcome also to everyone joining on YouTube, as this is live stream on YouTube as well. This morning we have a special session. This is the second times in a row that FKP is working with the Indonesian Regional Science Association, or IRSA, to present the recipients, the papers that are recipients of the 2023 IRSA-BKF Badan Kebijakan Fiskal Paper Awards. So we have 3 papers to be presented today, and each paper will be presented, and then we'll have a quick discussion and question and answer session. Before we start with the presentations, let me also welcome Professor Devanto Pratomo, who is the current Vice President, or is it the outgoing Vice President? We were just discussing about this earlier, because IRSA is undergoing a change in the board. However, Pak Devanto is here on behalf of IRSA. Thank you very much, Pak Devanto. And Pak Devanto will provide remarks on this IRSA-BKF Paper Awards, and also perhaps the IRSA conference that we just had 2 weeks ago. Silakan Pak Devanto, time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much Bu Ludia. Selamat pagi, good morning Bapak Ibu friends. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, it's my pleasure for us, IRSA, Indonesian Regional Science Association, to have a seminar today, collaborate with the FKP, Forum Kebijakan Pembangunan, and BKF, Badan Kebijakan Fiskal, and also NU, Indonesia Project Australian National University. I would also like to congratulate to the 3 winners or 3 recipients of the IRSA-BKF Research Award 2023. IRSA itself is a multidisciplinary association aiming to strengthen the research or studies on regional development in Indonesia. And one of the main activities of IRSA actually is the annual conference, which this year has been held for the 18th times, and was held in the Institute Pertanian Bogor in Bogor about 2 weeks ago. And then next year will be also held in Universitas Patimura in Ambon. IRSA conference basically beside providing a platform or media which a researcher can meet the other researcher to discuss and strengthen their study. It also provides a platform or media between researcher and also policymaker, including the Badan Kebijakan Fiskal, to discuss the topic that is important in regional development in Indonesia. And IRSA-BKF Research Award basically is one of our strategy to connecting between the policymaker and also researcher in association IRSA. So policymaker can provide what topic they need, and also researcher or academician could respond what they have or they study. And the topic of the IRSA-BKF Research Award this year, the topic is basically different for each year, depends on the BKF needs. And 3 among the goods, which you will see the presentation soon, then receive what is called the IRSA-BKF Paper Awards. And this year, 2023, IRSA-BKF Paper Award is focusing on the topic of structural economic transformation for growth acceleration. The topic actually is quite timely, as the topic is allocated for discussing the consequences of the downstreaming industry development policies, the change in both national and regional economic structure toward their economy and also welfare of their people. This is also important topic regarding the development, particularly after we met the COVID-19 pandemic in the last 2 years. So again, thank you for the FKP, Badan Kebijakan Fiskal on BKF, and you Indonesia Project for the collaboration. Thank you also for the reviewer and also all of the presenter and participant today. Hope the audience will enjoy the presentation of the three recipients of IRSA-BKF Award 2023. Thank you very much. I return to Bu Lydia.
Thank you, Pak Devanto. And again, congratulations to the recipients and also to IRSA for the 18th, going on 19th conference. Yeah, hope to see you all and everyone can watch out for the news for the event next year in Ambon at Universitas Patimura. So let's start with the paper presentations. As probably you have seen in the announcement, the first paper will be presented by Professor Arief Anshory Yusuf of Universitas Padjadjaran. This paper is co-authored with Professor Peter War, who is also joining us from Bangkok this morning. The title is Pandemic-induced de-urbanization in Indonesia. So Pak Arief, good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for joining us this morning. So about 20 minutes for each paper presentation, and then we will have Q&A about 15 minutes. So if you have questions, you can write it in the Q&A box. Don't forget, it's Q&A box, not the chat box. The chat box is closed for chatting. Or you can raise your hand and we will unmute you to ask directly. So Pak Arief, the time is yours.
Thank you, Lid. And thank you for the opportunity to present this paper. And also thank you for the committee of the BKF Award that has given us this award. This paper was written by Peter Ward and me, and Peter is here. So he also can answer question later in the Q&A session. So this is about what we call pandemic-induced de-urbanization, so in Indonesia, urban and rural impact. This paper has been we has been working on this paper for quite a while. And I think I hope that it's still it's still relevant, but I'm sure it's relevant for the future in pandemic, perhaps. Yeah, but I think this paper hopefully will be coming soon in a journal. It's already in the final revisions. So this paper is quite long, but this paper is quite long, so we're not going to go through all of those. So I will give the draft of the paper to Lydia later on, so you guys can have a look. But in the paper, not in the presentation, we have at least 8 sections. First, of course, the introduction. Number 1 and number 2 is the background. So basically, this paper is not about the impact of pandemic as what generally people will see, because to look at the impact of pandemic, overall impact of the pandemic, we have to look at many issues, or many angles or many dimensions. We have the external demand, we have shock in income and things like that. But what we do here is only a part of what happened in the pandemic, which is the effect of the pandemic through the dynamic of the labor market that we observe in the data. This will not necessarily look at any other kind of impact. So only ceteris paribus, according to what we think relevant for the labor dynamic. So we're going straight to the model. So this is the production functions of the standard CGE model, because we're using CGE model. Maybe I just like to focus on the final part of the nesting of the production, where we divide labor into four types. First is unskilled farm labor, and then we call partly skilled, and then semi-skilled, and then skilled. The unskilled farm labor is quite special here because this is the kind of labor in agriculture that work in the agriculture sector, and that we assume that anyone from other three groups of the labor can easily switch to become unskilled farm labor, but not the other way around. So that's our assumption. So this is the one that I just mentioned before. And if you look at the urban and rural household, and this is coming from the database of the model that was constructed using specially developed social accounting matrix of Indonesia, you can see that the share of each type of the labor income according to different group of household in urban and rural area, and as well as by how poor and rich they are. So you can see, for example, here that if you are in rural household, the unskilled farm labor will be dominating the poorest group of household in rural areas, the one in triangle. But in urban area, it's not. The other way, in the urban area, the poor is actually dominated by income from semi-skilled labor and skilled labor. Of course, the richer you are, that pattern change. In the case of unskilled farm labor, the richer you are in rural area, the less you depend on it. And in urban household, the richer you are, you can see that the more you depend on skilled labor, but the less you depend on the other rest of the category of labor. And this is what we observe from August 2019 to August 2020 in terms of how the supply of this different type of labor. So first of all, we observe around 0.2% reduction in employment. This is a bit surprising for a while because people expect worse during the pandemic, but actually in Indonesia, people cannot afford to lose job, so they will do the job whatever they can find. This is normal in Indonesia, but there is a big switch in the category. So you can see here, for example, that the unskilled farm labor increased from 35.5% in August 2019 to 38.2%. This is the mid of the pandemic, 7.83%, with a corresponding decline in the rest of the three groups, particularly the semi-skilled labor in the formal sector, which presumably will be concentrated in urban areas. So this is what we call de-urbanization. Because of course agriculture are mostly located in rural area, so switch from formal labor market, semi-skilled labor, for example, to unskilled farm labor can be categorized or can be called, well, casually speaking, de-urbanization. And then, using that observation and other observation that I will explain later on again, we attempt to represent what happened using 4 simulation. I mean, 4 is the combinations of the other 3. So first, in simulation number 1, we call declining employment. So we reduce the employment or labor supply, call it, by 0.23%. And then in simulation 2, we call underemployment, because we observe that both workers in urban and rural area that still manage to work actually reduce their working hours. So urban work time declined by 2.4%, and rural work time declined by 2.1%. So this is, we consider this as a sign of productivity reduction. So we also use labor productivity shocks in simulation 2 to represent this underemployment. And then, of course, in the simulation 3, we simulate the de-urbanization according to the previous table that I showed, which is labor supply relocation when total employment is unchanged. So, and then we combine simulation 1 to 3 into simulation 4. So this last simulation, which is simulation 4, is what we think the most representative aspect of the labor dynamics during at least 1 year of the COVID crisis. So, and this is the result. This is the macro and sectoral result. Sorry. We have 4 columns here representing each of the 4 simulation. As you can see here, for example, the 0.23 employment shock only slightly reduce GDP and other output. But as you can see here, the real factor return effect show that the decline in labor supply actually increase the real wage a little bit of the labor. And then the productivity shock is shown in the column 2. As you can see here, it's quite significantly changed the output of all the sectors. The largest is agriculture, and then as you can see here, because the productivity shock will actually shift the labor demand function to the left, so you will have declining marginal productivity of labor for all of the category of labor. So then their wage, given inflation increase, will tend to decline. So the real factor return, the real wage decline because of this. And of course, in the corresponding next table here, you can see the impact on poverty and inequality. So if you have a real wage effect that is negative, you can expect that the household consumption in both in urban area, rural area to be falling. This is, for example, in urban area, it changed by 1.5%, and in rural area, it changed by minus 0.78%, and it increased poverty in urban area by 0.2% and in rural area by 0.3%. And the last simulation is the what we call labor supply shift, the main story of the paper, which is the de-urbanization. As you can see here, despite the GDP does not change much, because this is only a switch, the total employment is unchanged, so the GDP doesn't really change much. But the negative sign here actually tell you something, that the switch from more productive activities to less productive activities then create inefficiency in the economy, so it will reduce the GDP by minus 0.012. But the effect that I would like to pay more attention is this one. So because the flux of the new labor supply to the rural area, so the unskilled farm labor actually declined by almost 20%, 18% precisely. And of course, the opposite happened in other kind of labor that is expected where the source of the labor influx coming from, which is the skilled labor, they will decline, the supply will decline, of course, expectedly the labor, the real wage will increase. And this effect then translate into a large decline in real expenditures of the rural population. Well, it's not that much, but this is the mean. The mean of the rural population declined by 0.2%. But this is, of course, it's not what happened if you see the distributions of that impact. Because if you see it, like later on, you will see that, of course, even in rural area, the concentrations of the the concentration of the rural agricultural worker is among the poor, right? So 0.2 is not the representation of those people in the bottom of the distributions. Yet, if you see the poverty impact, it's quite 0. Almost close to 0.5. It's big, I think. So then the last one is the combinations of all of the three simulation. So as you can see here, the actually in simulation like this, if you combine 1 to 3, the column 4 will just add up plus 1 to 3. So here you can see that the unskilled farm labor end up having their factor return fall by 18% compared to without the shock. And this is the result in poverty. So it increased poverty in both rural area, in urban area, but in urban area, this is not because of the urbanization, it's because they are the first the first two of the simulation. But in rural area, the increase of 0.7% of poverty incidence actually contributed the most by simulation number 3, which is the de-urbanization. So the story here is that the simulation that we did in the dynamic of the labor market has found both an urban and rural area experience increase in poverty, but rural area disproportionately bear the burden more than the rural areas. And this is what I told you about. So if you see simulation 4, which is the black box here, you can see that in rural area, the effect of simulation 4 is typically regressive. Yeah, regressive means the poorer you are, you get the bigger burden. In urban area, this we can really tell. So this is natural, but it doesn't have any negative impact on the household in the middle. It has only effects a little bit on the household at the bottom and the household at the top. And then the next analysis that we did in this paper is asking ourselves why the real factor return of this simulation is so wide, so big. And of course, this may be related to the parameters. There are two parameters that is important here, or relevant, is the elasticity of substitutions between type of labor, the elasticity of substitutions between labors and other primary input. And then from the various sources that we use to give the point estimate of the parameter, we come up with the elasticity of the dose elasticity is 0.48 and 0.35. So the question is, What if we are not certain that this is the correct number? So we did sensitivity analysis by varying elasticity among primary factors and elasticity among labor category. And then as you can see here, actually, that they don't really change the result much. So the smallest increase is 16.7% and the largest is 30.8%. So it's still a significant number. And here the illustration and to real wage. And also we also did the sensitivity analysis for the what happened between urban and rural area in terms of their consumption. So this is the ratio of urban consumption to rural consumptions. As you can see here, again, we found that it's not that sensitive to the parameter of variations. So this is the conclusion. So first, most observers say that COVID-19 affected urban household more than rural household. But I think if we look again the labor market, the story may have been incomplete because we may as well observe that during the period of COVID, urban household may have been suffer more than rural household, but those are the effect of various different forms of COVID-19 crisis in the economy. But if we only look at the labor market, so we actually may have a different kind of effect as what many observers say. So labor market effect of COVID-19 included a large temporary movement of workers from urban to rural employment. This is what we call de-urbanization. And to find rural employment, those workers have to compete with existing unskilled workers, at least for the time, at least temporarily. And as a result, rural wage forced downward, tend to raise rural poverty incidence. This effect transformed much of the economic hardship caused by the pandemic from urban to rural housing. This finding may have important implication for social protection policy because rural household may be even more severely affected than most observers think. Then also we realized that long ago during the previous crisis in the 1990s, people always say that the Indonesian agricultural sector is the shock absorber. But I think given the structural transformation that Indonesia has experienced for the last few decades, that may have changed. The capacity of Indonesian agricultural sector to be an economic absorber may be declining. So we can observe that agriculture share of employment is falling, I think quite a lot, and also due to mechanization, the demand for agricultural labor, in fact, is becoming more inelastic. So this is something that maybe we can share or we can learn from the exercise that we did in this paper. I think that's our presentation, Lydia. We can have a Q&A and Peter may have to answer the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Arief. So I listened to this presentation at the IRSA conference. So this is my second time. I understand a little bit more. Everyone, you have the opportunity to ask your questions or give comments by writing in the Q&A box, or you can raise your hand and then I will unmute you so you can ask directly. So feel free to ask questions, or if it's very clear, so that's kudos to the presentation. So while we wait for questions from the attendees, or maybe panelists have questions, I would like to ask about this I guess crowding of workers to the agriculture sector. What happened to the production? Does that increase production? Can you see that from your data, or this is not something that that is included in the analysis? Because so there's a lot of influx of workers. does it mean that agricultural products then become cheaper and more abundant? So in the end, everyone, and actually urban people benefits because their consumption is cheaper. So this is additional subsidy by the rural areas to the urban households. So that's from me, but if there is anyone else with a question, feel free to write it in the Q&A box or raise your hand. So maybe take that question first while we wait for additional.
Thank you, Lid. I think that's very interesting question to be raised. And in fact, our model simulation suggests as what you expected before, because we have an increase, for example, in simulation 4 of agricultural output by around 5%, whereas the rest of the sector are having declined output. So indeed, it may increase the output. However, of course, in terms of the welfare, what matters is not only output, because if those output then distributed, if the proceeds of that output from the bigger harvest is distributed to workers that are larger numbers, so they may not necessarily translate into more welfare in the rural areas. So in fact, it's not. At least what our model tells. But it may have cushioning effect as an economy-wide as a whole, because of course accumulation reflect reality, but as far as I remember, agriculture is, in terms of its output, is actually hanging on more during the COVID-19. So maybe that's also a sign that what you expect is basically happening. Yeah, thank you, Lid.
Okay, thank you. I see that there are a couple of raised hands from Mas Immanuel Satya Pekerti and well, there was another one, but however, I will open the mic and allow or let Pak Immanuel to ask the question.
Maybe Peter want to say something.
Oh, sorry. Before that, yeah. Before we take our, if you would like to something, Peter.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Wonderful question, Lydia. That really was spot on. You really did understand more the second time around.
Thank you.
I noticed that when I went into the table of economic summary results, there's a mistake in the table simulation results A. So we can't tell from the table whether agricultural output went up or not, but it must have, because agricultural employment went up a lot. So agricultural output went up, and that's reflected in the price of agricultural goods. So this de-urbanisation effect had a food price reducing effect. And that's an important part of what needs to be discussed in the conclusion. So thank you very much, Lydia. We'll fix that. And yeah, great question.
All right, thank you. Mas Immanuel, if you can unmute your mic, please go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Thank you for the presentation, Prof. Arief and Professor War. I have a couple of questions. The first one, I wanted to ask if you consider the that a lot of the workers exit the labor force, as a lot of literature has documented. And in regards to that, I remember that you said that the workers probably can't afford to lose jobs, but is this apparent somewhere in the data? And the second one, I've read that Ramani and Bloom from the NBR has documented something that's called the donut effect. It's basically the migration of workers, mainly those who can work remotely. They move outside of the city to avoid the high living costs. yeah, I can imagine that this could possibly increase the living cost in the rural area and probably increase the rural poverty as you have shown. But did this happen to us in Indonesia? That's probably from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. But before you answer that question, or you think there's another one? So I think you can answer that question because that's quite a lot. And then there's another question from Darenda in the Q&A box, which I will read later.
Well, that's an interesting observation. I think so. I cannot answer that through the data because the data doesn't really. We don't really have the data of those kind of activities, whether or not people in rural area, people in urban area move physically to rural area. Assuming in rural area we have broadband internet connection, but which is I don't think in Indonesia rural area has a facility that enable workers in urban area to move to rural area and work like very conveniently, like in America or something. So my guess is, so I just can guess. My guess is that I don't think that really happened in Indonesia because of that reasons. But so what happened is that those who move, I think those are the one that we lose job in urban area, and they just can only find unskilled farm worker. At least like that. At least that's what we see in the data. So I can guess that what may happen in other countries that have rural internet, good rural internet infrastructures. I think that the case.
Yes. May I come in there too?
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, that's a very important point. In the US, which that paper you mentioned is focusing on, workers who can work from home are much less affected than workers who are unable to work from home. Say workers in the service sector or in the less skilled employment categories are unable to work from home. They have to be there on the job to do the work. The people who cannot work from home are the most affected, and the people who can work from home are the least affected. Well, in the Indonesian context, that means that the most highly skilled categories, these are the people who are most likely to be able to work from home. And the least skilled categories, including farm workers, they are the least likely to be able to work from home, as Arief just said. So this is another reason why the impact of the crisis was most pronounced on the least skilled workers, and especially rural workers. This is a very important point. A big difference between the impact of the pandemic in countries like the United States and Europe, where there's a lot of scope for working from home, and in a country like Indonesia, where there's much less scope, and it only exists in the most skilled categories.
All right, thank you. Perhaps this is two questions that are a little bit related. First is from Pak Darendra Wardana. To what extent is this de-urbanization persisting now? Supposedly, this is now the recovery phase. This is also related to Pak Ganda Sibarani's question, the second part, whether this de-urbanization is persisting in the, after more than 2 years. And Pak Ganda has another question, whether this is Java phenomenon, where the urban area is very impacted by restriction of movement, or is this also happening outside of Java?
Okay. I think if you look at the most recent labor market data for Sakarnas, at least we see that informality that changed in 2020 by around 5% has not climbed up even a bit. So that 5% gap in informality that happened during 2020 now still persists. I'm not sure this is related directly to the de-urbanization that is happening, but I think for some reasons it may. So I will not be surprised if those people who are still there are still there. And also, if you see the poverty, the most recent poverty estimate, March 2023, you can see that the poverty has not been yet returned to the pre-pandemic level. So as long as this poverty has not returned to the pre-pandemic level, I won't be surprised that what we explained here with all the Indonesian is still there. I may be wrong. But at least that's a sign. And the next one is about
whether it's a Java phenomenon because of the restrictions in the cities.
I think they are Java related mostly.
Yeah. Would you like to add anything, Peter?
Yes, Java especially, that's what I would say, because this movement from urban to rural areas that we call de-urbanization, that's easiest in Java and more difficult in the outer islands of Indonesia. So we would expect that the de-urbanization story is more pronounced in Java than elsewhere in Indonesia. I think it's going to be mainly, but not exclusively, a Java story.
Okay.
Would you agree with that, Arief? Mainly, but not exclusively.
Yes,
Java.
yes, yeah. Predominantly Java. Yeah, predominantly.
All right. So,
very good questions. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much, Arief and
thank you,
Peter, for your time this morning. And I hope this is informative and insightful for the attendees for doing further research in this area. The paper I have linked in the FKP website. There's a working paper from, I think, last year or 2 years ago. So you can download from, I have a link in the FKP website, so if you'd like to download. So thanks again, and let's move on to the second presenter or the second paper. So the second paper is, let me see, hang on while I change the spotlight. All right, hello Pak Muhammad Syaikh Rohman atau Mas Rohman, who will be presenting his paper on the impact of a longer period of schooling on health and wealth outcomes. So Pak Rohman is from the Faculty of Economics and Business at Universitas Airlangga, joining us from Surabaya this morning. So Pak Rohman, about 20 minutes. The time is yours.
Wait a second. Wait.
No.
Wait a second. I just want to share my PowerPoint.
Silakan, Pak. So just to let everyone know, we have more than almost 70 people in the Zoom room right now. Sorry that you cannot see each other, but this is a feature, a security feature of our Zoom.
Okay, thank you, Bu Lydia, for the opportunity to share about my paper. So let's start, and thank you for the IRSA giving the awarded as the best paper. I don't know exactly why I chosen the award, but let me share about my research paper. Well, this is the paper is just about how the impact of the changes policy in the educational policy into the health human capital outcomes. So the title is the impact of the longer period of schooling in the health outcome and wealth outcome Indonesian case study. This is the outline. I just jump into the most interesting policy things because it's about the policy analysis. Well, at the study, there is some studies that claims Indonesia have experienced a longer school period in around 1978. So when Mr. Daud Yusuf, as the Ministry of Education and Culture, ratified the initial requirement regarding the enrollment date. So before this ratified policy, the enrollment date, it was on the January in every year, but Mr. Daud just ratified to the July. So this, some people say that it might be there is a longer school period for some cohort and other is not. So that's why my study is want to know the impact of this ratified policy to the some outcomes. Okay. This is some previous study. There might be a lot of study outside the Indonesia, but most study that conducted in Indonesia is conducted by Parinduri, which is a lot of study about the longer school in here. So I just want to reconfirm the result of Parinduri in that in previous research. So this is why this is the story about the policy itself. I have mentioned before. We know that Indonesia have a lot of policy about the educational system. In 1984, we have basic education in the first 6 years of primary school, but also in Indonesian's educational school, we have the requirement of entering the primary school is around 7 years old. But in 1978, other requirement was that school enrollment took place beginning in January. However, this enrollment policy was changed when Daud Yusuf, as Ministry of Education and Culture, ratified this initial requirement regarding the enrollment date. He set the enrollment date from the beginning January 1987 to the beginning of July 1978. And his policy was implemented on April 1978. So there is some consequences about this changing policy. The first, any student who had enrolled in January 1978 had to repeat their grade. So in other words, instead of completing their current grade on December 1978, those students who are enrolled in January or before January 1978 remain in the same grade from July until June 1979. So basically, they were forced to reattain the same grade in that years. So at the time, many protests from the parents, community leader, who this policy is nonsense. There is no implication about the policy on their student, or it just make some educational cost is more highly, terus some kind of costly. That's the things. This is the illustrate. So in the upper timeline, this one is the cohort that experience a longer stay. So before the 1978, cohort who born in 1971 will experience a little bit longer school period from January to July because they must be reattained in the same grade. But cohort after who were born after 1971, who will be enter the school after the policy, will no longer experience school period. So that's why we have two cohorts that treatment by this policy and another for the control. Therefore, I use the regression discontinuity design or RDD or RD to analyze the impact of this policy. But the most important thing that for the regression discontinuity is that we have to find the clear cut point for this policy. So that first one, and the second one, we have the similar observed and unobserved characteristic. So to ensure there is no influence from the other policy around the cutoff. Okay. This is, I tried to give some modeling in my analysis. So I would like to, this is the probability of individual treatment can be formulated as follow. So if the cohort was burned before 1970, it might be, or there's probability to give to have experience a longer school period, and others is not. Therefore, this year of birth can be assigned as the dummy and will be used as instrument variable in the fuzzy RT. We use the 2SLS estimation. So the first one, the first equation in this screen represent to check whether there is axis for the jump around the cutoff or not. And then the radius form is to show the main model. Is there any impact on the year of birth or the longer school of period to the outcomes? So that's my model in this paper. I use the EFLS 5 updated in 2015 that I use in this paper, and then I got some information related to health, wealth in the household level or individual level. So I use 1,172 as observation, and then I use some control variable. I use the individual smoking behavior and sleep quality as a health outcome, and the wealth outcome I use a monthly earning, which is the sum of the side income and the main income in the for the household, and the job type is formal or informal job. So another control variable I use in this model is the gender, rural area, family size, parent smoking behavior, and ethnicity. This is my a summary status of my data that I can use. So I use I think the observation is the same, nanti 5173, and this is the summary static of earlier and younger cohort. Now, before we estimate the main model, we need to know the validity test of the RT. That's the first thing that I need to ensure in my model. So by using the first model I use, I would like to check is there any jump when the around the 1971 about the longer school probability of they got a longer school period or not. So this is the result. The picture shows that students who were born before 1971 have a higher position, but after the policy, who are students who are born in 1971 and above 1971, there a drop there. So it means that there might be the policy the jump in around the policy. So that's the first validity test, and I also show the model, and yes, the result shows that in any kind of the model in my that I have created, there is some there's indicator that significant in the year of birth. That's mean it's mean that year of birth might be the clear-cut point for the RT design. This is my decision why this presentation might be, I can use the RT to analyze this policy. The second validity test I need to ensure is that any continuity in the assignment variable of the year of birth. This validity test to ensure that near the policy itself, in 1971, there is no other policy that might cause there a jump. So the visual assignment in here is clearly there is no jump around the policy, right? So I think it's my validity that RT can be used in this analysis. The second validity test is we need to ensure about the covariate or the other variable that we can use in the model. And the first validity test in the visual validity, it shows that, it might be a slight jump, but it's okay. But for the most significant jump is from the family size on the assignment variable. So why it might appear in the family size? Because around the 1971, there is a policy about, keluarga berencana. So it might be influenced by that policy itself. But we can ensure for the regression in this in the right result. We know that there is for the control variable, we know that there is no significance that might appear in this result. So that's why we ensure that there is no continuity, there is no jump around this policy. So after we examine the validity test, I run the mind model, and this is show that a longer schooling period is significant to influence the smoking behavior of student, which is decreasing smoking behavior of student, which means a longer school period might have a good policy for the student to have a good behavior on smoking itself. But the second thing, the most interesting is in the normal sleep. A longer school period have decreased the probability student who have a normal sleep. I mean, it means that we know the student, we have a lot of homework. We have to study in the night, and then after in the morning we have to start in early morning. Even in the remote area, we need to start schooling from our home is around 5 or 4 o'clock. So that's why they have likely to have less likely to have a normal sleep.
Sorry, Pak Rohman, but it doesn't seem that from the previous slide on normal sleep, the number is the same, 0.3 and 0.03 and 0.03. Maybe that's an error in the slide.
Yeah, I think it might be the error. I think.
Okay, it should be different. Yeah.
Yeah, it should be
or
different.
the B should be like lower.
Because we have another control variable in the model B. Thank you. Mbak Lydia, for the what is it, correction.
Yeah.
So in the second model, I have to run with the wealth outcome. So this is the result of the wealth outcome. We know that in the longer school period, to the income, there is no insignificant the result. So it might so it means that longer school periods is not really influenced to the student future incomes, because one of the reason why the longer school periods is not really influence the student future income, because the policy is not what is it, the change in the investment, human capital investment, because they are only change the enrollment date without any changes in the curriculum or any other skill sets. So that's why it might be it's not really influence the student future incomes. And then the formal jobs, might be the longer school period might be decrease the probability of student to get the formal jobs. Why is that? One of the reasons that I can explain in my paper is about the urbanization in 1970, in 90s and 80s. Why? Because there is a lot of urbanization around that years. So that's why it's a bit hard to get a formal job at that moment. So that's why it might be decrease the probability to a student who are get a longer school period because this policy. The conclusion, a longer school period due to the reform of the school enrollment date might affect in some various outcome. It decreased the probability of smoking behavior among students, but it increased the likelihood that they will suffer for a sleeping disorder, because our habit in the schooling, we have a lot of homework, and then we need to get up early for the school. The second one is the reform of the schooling enrollment date had no impact on the student future income, because there is no additional or changes in the curriculum or the skill set for the student, and it decreased the probability of student being employed in the formal job sector, as at that moment there was urbanization, a lot of urbanization in Indonesia. The absent, it explained in the next point. The absence of new curriculum has promoted awareness, smoking behavior, and led more sleeping disorder among students. And then it's claimed that instead of investing in education, the reform is intended to synchronize the academic and the government financial year commencement dates. As consequence, the impact of this policy is powerless to exploit the human capital investment in Indonesia. So that's why I think that might be the last slide that I will share in this presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Pak Rohman, for the presentation. And again, let me invite attendees if you would like to make a comment or post a question. Also in YouTube, if you are following on YouTube and you'd like to post a question, please write it in the comment box. We can transfer it to the Zoom and ask the question to the presenter. So while waiting for the question, I had one observation about the family size in the graph that you showed. I noticed I didn't look very carefully, but I noticed that there's a big jump in family size, but I think that might look like the jump is bigger than it is because you didn't start the vertical axis on 0. You started the vertical axis, I think, not on 0. I think on number 2 or 3 or something like that. So it looks like there is a big jump, but if you had started the x-axis on 0, I don't think it will look that big as a jump, because it is kind of, it raises question, yeah, because of only 1 or 1.5 year different, and then there is a big jump in family size. Yeah, the top left, yeah, graph, yeah. It start on, is it starting on 2 or 1, or is it 0 or not?
Yeah, it's not 0, I think.
Yeah. So that's why it looks like there's an extreme jump, but maybe if you don't if you start on 0, probably not that extreme. So that is just an observation. And probably I think the most interesting finding that I found is that this reduces the incidence of smoking. Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's surprising to me. It is what you explained a little bit about how that mechanism is, but could it be that like if you start, could we say that if you start student earlier going to school, that it will reduce the chances of probably of smoking, or is that not the conclusion from this research?
Yeah, thank you, Mbak Lydia, for raising these results. So yeah, in here, for the channeling for why this schooling period might be reduce the smoking behavior, I don't know. Maybe one of the reasons is possible is that they spend more time with the good environment in their school, the first one. And that it could be, they spend a lot. So there is, the educational system back then is different with now. So teacher might be more attention to their student. The student also might get the serious advice from their student as well, from the teacher as well. So that's why it could be the reason. But if you see in here, gender the gender variable have positively increased the smoking probability. In here, gender for male, is still the fact that male are more tend to have a lot of smoking behavior compared to women, because at that moment, value for women, social value for women for smoking itself is really, in this text, the contribution of gender to individual decision to smoke send is positive sign is likely of alien cohort having smoke behavior. So male are more tend to be smoking than women. The social disapproval of women smoking in Indonesia might be contributing factor why Indonesian men have more probability smoking behavior. Because I don't know, it might be in 1978 or 90s or 70s, there is a social disapproval for women smoking in Indonesia. It could be the reason, one of the reason as well, I think. Thank you. You still mute, Abu.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, but the difference is only, I think, 6 months between the cohorts. So those 6 months or slightly more, ya Pak, ya, is affecting this later life outcomes, as also in terms of sleeping and other indicators. So let me see if there are any questions. Okay, from Pak Rudi Kurniawan. Okay, this is a confirmation that reflecting from personal experience, learn to smoke at school. So That's probably I don't know if you were in which cohort, Pak Rudi. If you were in the before 1972 cohort, maybe you might not be smoking now. I don't know. So I guess that's a comment. If you would like
Thank
to
you.
add a comment later from Ginanjar, apakah bisa dijelaskan? Can you explain
The entity.
about ethnicity, the factor about ethnicity that also affects the health outcome?
Yeah. One of the reason in my research paper is that in that moment, Javanese, right, in here, in the smoking behavior. Well, Javanese is less likely to have a smoking behavior. It's a bit contradictive, I think. But the result is really significant. But I don't. Wait a second. Let me just search for. But first, let me for this normal sleep. Yeah, you know, the ethnicity of Javanese have a probability to have a normal sleep, right? Yeah, it could be clear that in Java there most of them have school in the Java is more abundant compared to the other ethnicity, right? So that's why it could be, and the culture of Java might affect the probability to their children to go to school. So that's why it could be, as we know, there is before this policy, there is another policy before. If you see the impress, as they impress, it could be one of the reason the school facility have more a lot of abundant in Java island. So that's why. But for the health, for the smoking behavior, let me check for the minor research. I think I forgot to this. Ethnicity, yeah. Yeah, it's a bit. Thank you for Kinanjat spotting this result. But I think I didn't explain it for the ethnicity in my research paper. So I would like to add some more comment in the ethnicity on the health. Thank you, Pak Kinanjar.
Okay, thank you. We have 2 more minutes. If anyone would like to ask or make comment about this. As I was reading listening to the presentation, I was born in 1972. So I was thinking, did I experience longer period of schooling? So this is opening your own age, yeah. But this is interesting, and I guess if people here are interested in using IFLS, which is a rich database that you can use to see to follow households and individuals and see how various policies in Indonesia have affected their later life outcome, which Rohman have shown here. So it can yield a lot of interesting results. Yeah. And probably we need to think a little bit more about what this means about policy, but definitely this is interesting and policy relevant, research. So Oh, Peter, you have your hand up. Sorry, I didn't see. Okay, if you would like to pose your question, go ahead, Pak.
Yeah, I do have a question.
Yes.
In the case of the impact of COVID-19, one of the effects that people have emphasized is that for many children, years of schooling will have been interrupted. And this will have important effects. So my question is, do your results help us to understand what the impact of that interruption of schooling due to COVID-19 might be for Indonesia? Do your results help us with that? If yes, then I would suggest that you put that in your conclusions, because that's a really important story.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for the comments. Yeah. Well, I wrote this. What is it? The paper just before the COVID outbreaks. So I haven't have any opinion about the COVID before this paper have done. So that's why I didn't give any conclusion here. But yeah, if I see from the result, even only 6 months disruption for the policy, it might affect some future outcome for the students. So it could be there was an implication of the disruption on the education because of COVID, I think. But yeah, we need to analyze with the data, the current data things. But yeah, that's my challengings in the future research, I think. Thank you, Mr. Peter, for the insight from the conclusion.
Okay, thank you. So that is the second paper. Pak Rohman, if you would like to share the slides, please send them to us, and then I will put it for distributed to attendees.
Okay.
Thank you again for your time, and congratulations on the award, IRSA-BKF Award. So let's move to the third presentation. The team is all here. It will be okay. Let me hang on while I do some housekeeping on the Zoom. So the team from Bappenas, I guess we can call that from Bappenas. Although the research is not well, Pak Ahmad Rifai and team will explain, it does not reflect institutional opinion ya Pak ya, but the research is on something that is a hot topic nowadays, yeah, about hilirisasi or downstreaming. So the title of the paper is Economy-Wide Impacts of Natural Resource Downstream Policy, the Case of Nickel Moratorium, by Ahmad Rifai of Bappenas and Learning Up Institute, Dodi Purwo Haryono from Bappenas, and Muhammad Fikri Ramadan from Bappenas. And while I didn't attend the presentation at the conference, I heard several people say that it was a very good presentation. So congratulations also on the award. So about 20 minutes, the time is yours, Pak Ahmad and team.
Okay, can you hear me, Bu Lydia? Okay, thank you.
Yes, Pak.
Let me share my presentation. Okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you for this opportunity. We will present our paper entitled Economy-Wide Impact of Natural Resource Downstream Policy, the Case of Nickel Moratorium. So the introduction, we will start with nickel has been a rising commodity recently. It is driven by the electric vehicle trend, which requires nickel as one of the components for the battery. Nickel also emerged as a clean energy alternative, and it makes demand for nickel soar in the future. However, the distribution of nickel reserve is extremely diverse between countries. Fortunately, Indonesia is one of the countries with the largest nickel reserve in the world. Indonesia produced about 1 million metric tons of nickel and contributed roughly 37% of the world in 2021. It increased compared to 770,000 metric tons in 2020. And in addition, this production is the highest among nickel producing countries and is supported by large nickel reserve of approximately 21 million metric tons in 2021. Thus, Indonesia's nickel production and reserves will have a significant role in the global supply chain. Nevertheless, Indonesia exported nickel ore with very low value added. Then, with the promising nickel opportunities to advance economic diversification in the future, Indonesia implemented nickel downstream policy in 2020. The policy starts with nickel export moratorium and building its ecosystem to downstream nickel. And then the result of this policy is quite satisfactory, as indicated by a significant increase in export of nickel derivative products such as ferronickel in 2022. Specifically, before nickel moratorium was executed, nickel ore export reached about $1.1 billion and ferronickel was only $2.6 billion. Furthermore, after the policy was performed, nickel ore export was only $29, while ferronickel enhanced significantly to $13.6 billion in 2022. And then, in which sector are nickel derivative products mostly absorbed? According to National Research and Innovation Agency, RIN, almost 70% of nickel derivative products in the world are used as stainless steel raw material. And in Indonesia, most nickel derivative products still flow to stainless steel sector, particularly in form of welded pipe. Meanwhile, battery industry are still under development. In addition, other sectors such as seamless pipe, wall, nut, and so on are not available at the moment. Therefore, opportunities for nickel derivative industry are still wide open in Indonesia. So, our research objective, to the best of our knowledge, there are no specific studies discussed about the nickel industry policy, particularly using economy-wide impact approach. So this study aims to fill the research gap and to contribute recent literature on nickel issue as a rising commodity lately. Considering the impact of nickel downstream policy, which is expected to be extensive, so the study aims to investigate the impact of downstream nickel on the Indonesian economy. And for the next session, for the methodology and data, my colleague will continue presentation.
All right, thank you for the chance. Next, I'll talk about the methodology and data. First, we talk about the model. The CGA model, or computable general equilibrium, is one of the analyses that which remains the most predominant method to investigate the effect of various policy simulations, such as environment, infrastructure, tax reform, energy, and international trade. The CGA model is a general equilibrium model that models actors or agents involved in an economy and their behavioral interactions. Each agent in the economy will interact with each other until a general equilibrium condition achieved in each market. Therefore, a comprehensive understanding of the impact of the policy will be obtained. In the in Indonesia itself, we have a CG in total model, which is developed in 2020 before based on IRIO, and it is based on the derived from the enormous regional model or term, which is an interregional model of Australian economy, which is developed by Mark Horridge and Whitworth. The term model itself is a bottom-up CG model, which treats each region as a separate economy. A bottom-up model here explicitly involves modeling economic activities determined by economic interaction in each region as its separate economy. The term model is a powerful analysis tool for examining the regional shock simulations, particularly from the supply side that may be region-specific. Next. In the basic model of CG in term, it is broadly similar to other CG models, which belong to the economy-wide class models. The model itself provides sectoral ideas, aggregation, and behaviors of economic agents in a quantitative approach of the entire economy. According to Dixon and Rimmer, the indigenous empirical economy-wide model was input-output system, which we have IRIO 2016 as the base of the model. The system captures a whole economy and is structured by plotting the production of each industry to its consumption from every other sectors, including the final demander. The system reveals a specific disaggregation of the supply and use of inputs and outputs in the economy. In the basic quantitative model, we can see the IRIO structure, in which in the left-hand side, we have the X as the vector of outputs, and in the right-hand side, we have A times X, which is a matrix A times the vector X, in which it is a intermediate output, and if we sum it with the final demands by such as government, household, and export, we have the economy. We have the world economy reflected in the model. Next, in the database itself, the database in CGE mostly comes from the latest Indonesia interregional input-output model in 2016, which is released by Statistik Indonesia or BPS in 2020. And then we also use data sources from Susenas and Sakernas. According to the IRIO model, we have 34 regions and 185 sectors. In here, we aggregate those 185 baseline sectors into 8 sectors, which consist of agriculture, mining without nickel ore itself, manufacturing without iron and steel itself, utilities, construction, and services. Meanwhile, for regions, we aggregate those 34 regions into 6, which consist of Sumatra, Java, Kalimantan, Sulawesi, Bali Nusa Tenggara, and Maluku, Papua. Next. Here, in the simulation scenario, to assess the impact of nickel downstream policy, we assume that the policy is more likely to increase iron and steel sector at the moment. The assumption considers existing nickel downstream industry in Indonesia, in line with findings by RIN or National Research and Innovation Agency in 2020. The simulation is applied to export on iron and steel sector at national level with a static approach. And then we use the ferronickel as the proxy of our nickel downstream products. As for the shock magnitude itself, the shock magnitude is obtained by using the highest difference between trend, which will linearize from the output from the export of ferronickel by using logging by using log, and then we linearize those data from 2015 to 2019, which is the realization of ferronickel export. To calculate the baseline for ferronickel export, we use the simple linear trends. After obtaining the baseline value for ferronickel export, we calculate those difference, which can be seen in the next slide. Here we have the difference between the baseline scenario and realization, where we have the increase of sector iron steel about 31 and 1.4% between the baseline and realization. So we use that shock in the export for the sector iron steel by 31.14. Next, let's continue to Mr. Dodi.
Thank you, Mr. Fikri. Next, for the result and discussion. This nickel downstream policy is expected to influence many economic indicators, such as GDP, export itself, then real investment, real wage, and employment absorption. In general, the impact on GDP as follows in the figure. At national level, GDP increased by 0.003%. Meanwhile, the Sulawesi gaining the most increased by 0.035% of GDP. This result is in line with the great potential that Sulawesi has. It is the nickel reserve that Sulawesi has. And for the next part is the impact on the export itself. As we seen before, the simulation is giving the shock to the export of iron steel sector. Hence, this shock push export performance at aggregate level in Sulawesi increasing by 0.596%. Meanwhile, at the national level, the export goes up by 0.148. Kalimantan and Bali Nusra receive the lowest impact because there are no nickel smelter in there. On the next part, the investment is driven by the downstreaming, especially in Sulawesi. As mentioned before, Sulawesi has the highest nickel reserve. So the potential, this finding is aligned that at the national level, now the downstreaming is focused on Sulawesi, specifically in Sulawesi Tengah and Sulawesi Tenggara. Next, on the export and the wage is also increased, but as we can see, it is increased not that much. At the Sulawesi, it is only 0.055%, and at the national level, the wage also increased, though it's not high. It is only 0.10%. This increase in line with the fact that the iron steel sector as the part of downstreaming industry is heavily concentrated in technology. So the wage of the people relative increase low. On the next part, it is underemployment, as it is also in line with the wage that the increase in employment is limited because the technology that used on the sector that iron steel or the downstreaming of the iron ore is highly concentrated in the technology. Meanwhile, in some region, the unemployment shifting to the other region due to people movement. Next, on the sectoral output, because we divide in 8 sector, and we give the shock in the iron steel sector specifically by increasing its export. So the increase of the iron steel is expected to be high, and is also high in Sulawesi. Specifically, the number is 5.9% increase. While the nickel ore itself, it also increased due to the input that is needed to have a downstreaming. And some region didn't have the nickel ore mining, so it didn't affect on some regions such as Bali Nusra and Java itself. While in the manufacture, there is a shift from the manufacture beside iron steel to the iron steel itself. That is because there's a substitution effect from the iron steel and manufacture. On the utilities and construction, utilities is needed. Utilities is such water and electricity. It is needed to create the product for the downstreaming itself. So it is increased due to that. Meanwhile, the construction is also increased due to the expansion of the smelter as the impact of the IRSA or the downstream. Next, as the conclusion, in general, this policy impacts on GDP enhancement. So we see that it is in low magnitude. At regional level, Sulawesi is the region that is receiving the highest effect of this policy. Various macroeconomics such as GDP, export, investment, wage, and employment is shown that increase the highest among other regions. In addition, several regions also enjoy the spillover effect of this downstreaming policy, though it is in various magnitude. In sectoral context, because we give the shock to the iron steel as a proxy of the downstreaming of iron or nickel, it is expected and found that the iron steel sector itself gained the most or the significant increase among the other sector. In line with that, the highest increase in iron steel output occur in Sulawesi. Besides that increase, construction and utility sector also have experienced a significant increase in Sulawesi. These findings need to be pointed out that this policy should be encouraged more so that it can encourage the economic improvement in the region and sector as well as the national level. That's all from us.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the slides are very clear, and the discussion probably, I think this is a good presentation for those lecturers looking to introduce input-output models to their students. I think this is a very good presentation to let them see the overview, yeah, of what an input-output model, especially CGE model, can do. So again, I invite those attending to ask your question either by writing in the Q&A box or raising your hand. Meanwhile, while we wait, this is the job of the chair, yeah, always to think up questions while we wait for others to ask question. I noticed that in some regions the unemployment change is negative. Yeah, you had mentioned that this is due to movement of migration or movement. Is that the only reason, or is it because some sectors that are linked to the nickel sector also reduce their employment? That's probably it from me for now.
Okay. In our reason, this is because the sector itself shifting from the low value added to high value added, and then the employment from the low value added will shift to the high value added. So I think that's the basic reason from us.
So can we, if we look at the national level, I don't know if you've shown this, but at the national level, the net impact is still increasing employment. Is that the conclusion?
Yes, mainly due to the education. It opens a new opportunity for the people. And so all we have a net gain in the employment. And for the first that can you show the slide before? Right. Now, basically for Sulawesi itself, we have the iron sector, and we have the smelter itself there. And then for the other Sumatra, for the Maluku, Papua, we believe that there are the near, what is the proximity between the regions, the impact from the proximity between regions, and for Sumatra itself. For Sumatra itself, we know that there is an iron and steel ore. So we believe that the iron steel itself, sector itself, because we shop the iron steel here, we believe that it also increased the opportunity for employment in Sumatra. As for the others, Jawa, I remember correctly, they don't have iron steel sectors. As for Bali and Nusa Tenggara, if I remember correctly, they are mainly in services sectors.
Okay, thank you. If anyone would like to ask questions about maybe, oh, I see Peter raising his hand. Go ahead, please, Pak Peter. You're still unmuted. You're still muted. Sorry. Yeah.
I'm still. I'm unmuted now, I think.
Yes. Yes, you are.
Right. Thank you very much for this presentation. This is very important work for Bapanas to be undertaking. And I have some technical questions about the modeling and some suggestion maybe for the way the paper might be improved. So one set of issues that the paper has not discussed is model closure. Model closure, in order to understand the modeling results, we have to have the closure of the model spelled out fully. Now, model closure means which variables are exogenous and which variables are endogenous to the simulations. We can't understand the result without that. So, in particular, is total employment exogenous in the modeling? And is the trade balance exogenous in the modeling? Is the government's budget balance exogenous in the modeling? If not, the answer in each case is it's endogenous. And then my other comment is that the shocks I found a little bit unclear in the following sense. If in the normal closure of these kinds of models, the export of nickel, a commodity like nickel, would be an endogenous variable in the modeling. But you made it a shock. So to make it a shock, it has to become exogenous. So there was a shift between nickel export being endogenous to being exogenous in order to perform your shocks. So in order to do that, some other variable has to shift in the other direction. Some other variable that was exogenous has to become endogenous. Otherwise, a number of equations and a number of endogenous variables can't match. What variable was changed in order to make it possible to perform these shocks? We have to know the answers to these questions in order to understand what you've done. That's my question.
All right. Maybe we take this answer this question first before moving on to the Q&A box. Silakan. Who would like to respond?
I thought we were in Q&A already. My mistake.
Yeah. We are in the Q&A already.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yeah. I mean, before we take another question from the box,
Okay.
we can maybe the authors can respond to Pak Peter's comment and question first.
Thank you, Pak Peter. First of all, we use here the automatic closure from the model just as it is, automatic closure, and the static approach. That's for the answer for number one. And then for the second one, my colleague. Okay, we will answer later. Maybe I will answer the question from the Q&A first before we come up with the question from Peter. The Q&A.
Okay, hang on. While
Yes.
The authors think about your question, Peter, there's a question from Pak Rudi Kurniawan. So I guess based on your research, what do you think is the appropriate policy needed to get a successful hilirisasi strategy as expected?
Okay. Strategy for the downstream policy in Indonesia, right? Especially for nickel commodity. As far as I know, our nickel downstream is just 20 to 30% the increase of value added. So it's still far away. We can create the product until the end user. So if you ask how to be successful in this downstream policy, so we have to downstream until the end user of the end of the product. But it needs the technology, also the competitive labor, and so on. So we can talk very much here, but at the moment, we just about 20 to 30% for our value added and the nickel. So we still have many numbers to implement until the end of the product from nickel. But we go there. That's all from me.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Would you like to now go back to Pak Peter's question?
I think I know the answer to my second question. And I think the answer there is that the international demand for nickel products has been changed to make the demand endogenous sufficiently to enable the actual volume of exports that occurs from Indonesia to increase by that difference between the realized export and the trend level of export. So I think what's happened is that you've changed the international demand specification such that the demand has an endogenous parameter in it sufficiently large to get that outcome that you've talked about. So that's fine if that's what you've done. That would make sense. That's the way I would recommend it. But the paper has to explain that and say that that's what you did in order for the reader to know what's going on in the modeling. And then my first question was about, we're not going to be able to answer this one right now, but I'll just repeat what it is. It's that the modeling has to make clear what's the closure of the model. Level of employment. If the level of employment is fixed for Indonesia, then when employment goes up in one place, the model forces employment to go down in some other place. So that's the answer to Lydia's question. If level of employment is exogenous, that means it's fixed and employment cannot go up or down. So if it goes up in Sulawesi, it has to go down somewhere, Java or somewhere like that. So that's a consequence of the imposed by the modeling through the model closure. That's an example of why explaining model closure is so very important for understanding the results. And the same point about trade balance, about government budget balance, the paper did not explain closure of the model, and that's vital. That's my suggestion. Thank you very much for the presentation. Very interesting.
Thank you very much for your input, Pak Peter. Hopefully that is beneficial for the authors to revise their paper. Would you like to comment, Pak Ahmad or Pak Dodi, Pak Fikri?
That's all from our team here.
Thank you. All right. So that is the end of our FKP this today. Yeah, some morning for some of you, already past lunchtime for others. Thank you again, everyone who presented their papers. Congratulations, and I hope that attendees here can benefit from this presentation, and hopefully to inspire you to do more research and to participate in future IRSA conferences. And for the authors, good luck on revising your paper. We look forward to seeing it published in the near future. And sampai jumpa, as we will see you at the next FKP, which in August will be hosted by Lembaga Demografi, Faculty of Economics, Universitas Indonesia, and the Center for Indonesian Policy Studies, or CHIPS. Thanks again. Sampai jumpa. Selamat makan siang. Have good lunch, everyone.